We're counting down the 30 biggest abandoned megaprojects ever attempted in the United States. From vanished subways and deserted theme parks to multi-billion-dollar science labs left unfinished, this ranking traces the most ambitious visions that ran aground, from political gridlock to financial meltdowns and forces of nature. Some are forgotten relics buried beneath city streets, and others remain as haunting monuments above ground. Which megaproject suffered the greatest fall? Let's begin at number 30, deep beneath New York, with the remains of a lost subway. Beneath the streets of Rochester, New York, a forgotten subway still winds through the old bed of the Erie Canal. Built in the 1920s as a modern answer to growing city traffic, the subway opened in 1927 and ran for less than 30 years. By 1956, highways and falling ridership forced its closure. Some sections became parking garages and utility corridors, while others were sealed off and left to decay in the dark. The remains of Rochester's subway offer a glimpse of the city's ambition and the hidden costs of America's shift from rail to roads. In 1958, Pacific Ocean Park opened on the Santa Monica Pier, promising a new kind of seaside spectacle. Visitors lined up for the Ocean Skyway gondola, gliding above waves and neon-lit rides. The park's futuristic attractions and ocean themes drew crowds through the early 1960s, but rising costs and the shadow of Disneyland proved too much. Attendance dropped, debts mounted, and by 1967, the gates closed for good. Over the following years, the once bustling pier structures decayed and were eventually razed, leaving behind only memories of a short-lived dream that couldn't compete with California's entertainment giants. In the Bronx, Freedomland, USA opened in 1960 with the promise of turning American history into a theme park spectacle. Designed by C.V. Wood, the mastermind behind Disneyland, the park recreated everything from the Great Chicago Fire to the Wild West, all mapped out in the shape of the United States. But the novelty could not overcome mounting debts and fierce competition from the upcoming 1964 World's Fair. Visitor numbers fell short of projections, and after just 4 seasons, Freedomland closed its gates in 1964. The land did not stay empty for long. Soon, the massive co-op city housing development rose where the park once stood. By the mid-1980s, Heritage USA had become one of the most visited attractions in the United States, drawing millions to its Christian-themed hotels, water park, and shopping village. Televangelist Jim Bakker stood at the center of it all, promising faith and family fun. But behind the scenes, financial mismanagement and fraud unraveled the empire. In 1989, amid federal investigations and a public scandal, the ministry declared bankruptcy. Most of the sprawling complex was demolished, though the main hotel survived as a conference center. Heritage USA's meteoric rise and sudden collapse left a cautionary tale of unchecked ambition and broken trust. In May 2008, Myrtle Beach unveiled Hard Rock Park, a $400 million gamble on rock and roll spectacle. Planners expected 2 million visitors a year, but as the financial crisis hit, fewer than half showed up. By September, the park filed for bankruptcy, leaving bondholders empty-handed and thousands of jobs in limbo. A new owner tried to rescue the site as Freestyle Music Park in 2009, but the crowds never returned. After just 1 season under its original name, Hard Rock Park closed for good. It became a casualty of bad timing and economic shock, with its grand ambitions left echoing in silence. Buffalo Central Terminal opened its doors in 1929, a soaring Art Deco landmark meant to welcome thousands of rail travelers each day. For decades, its vast concourse echoed with footsteps and the sounds of arriving trains. But as passenger rail traffic dwindled after World War II, the station became emptier with each passing year. By 1979, the last train departed, leaving behind a hulking shell of faded grandeur. Occasional events still fill the space with life, but the cost of full restoration has kept the terminal in limbo. Today, its grand halls stand mostly silent, a monument to the era when railroads shaped American cities. On a hillside in Waterbury, Connecticut, broken statues and faded signs still linger where Holy Land, USA once drew crowds. Built in the late 1950s, this homemade biblical theme park offered scenes from Jerusalem and Bethlehem, crafted from salvaged materials and painted plywood. At its peak, tens of thousands visited each year, wandering winding paths lined with scripture and neon crosses. But by the early 1980s, the gates closed for good. Over time, vandalism and neglect took hold. Today, toppled monuments and graffiti-covered ruins stand as a ghostly reminder of one man's vision and the strange beauty found in America's abandoned dreams. In the 1950s, the shores of California's Salton Sea promised a new desert paradise. Developers carved out marinas, vacation homes, and hotels, drawing crowds to what was billed as the next Palm Springs. But beneath the surface, rising salinity and runoff from nearby farms began to poison the water. By the late 1960s, massive fish kills left beaches littered with bones, and the air grew thick with a sharp, rotting smell. By the 1970s, property values collapsed. Entire neighborhoods emptied out, leaving behind abandoned boats, silent docks, and a string of ghostly resorts, evidence of how quickly an environmental disaster can erase even the boldest dreams. In St. Louis, the Pruitt-Ego housing complex rose from the ground in the mid-1950s, promising a fresh start for thousands of families. 33 modernist towers stretched across nearly 60 acres, built as a bold answer to overcrowded slums. But within 2 decades, that promise had unraveled. Chronic underfunding left elevators broken, heat unreliable, and stairwells dark. Segregation and poverty bred isolation, and crime rates soared. By the early 1970s, the towers stood half-empty, battered by neglect and fear. In a dramatic series of controlled demolitions between 1972 and 1976, the city erased the project from its skyline, an explosive end to a failed vision of public housing. Underneath Cincinnati, silent tunnels stretch for 2.2 miles, a ghostly reminder of a subway system that never saw a single train. Construction began in the early 1920s, fueled by city bond issues and bold promises of modern transit. 4 stations took shape, their platforms finished, stairways built, and tilework gleaming in the dim light. But as costs doubled and the city's finances faltered, the money ran out. Sealed entrances and locked iron gates now guard these empty corridors. On rare tours, visitors describe the echo of footsteps in unfinished stations, a haunting glimpse of what could have transformed the city's future. Atlantic City's Revel Casino towered over the boardwalk when it opened in 2012, a gleaming $2.4 billion bet on luxury and high rollers. The financing stacked up in layers of tax-exempt bonds and state incentives, but the market was already crowded and gamblers were not flocking in. By 2014, Revel filed for bankruptcy after just 2 years. It shut its doors with thousands of jobs lost and debts unpaid. In 2015, the entire property sold for only $82 million, a fraction of what was poured into its glass and steel. Revel's collapse stands as one of the costliest casino failures in American history. The Trump Taj Mahal opened its doors in 1990 with promises of unmatched luxury and scale, but the casino quickly found itself drowning in debt. High-interest bonds and fierce competition strained its finances from the start. Over the next 2 decades, the property cycled through 3 bankruptcies as labor disputes flared and market saturation squeezed profits. Despite periodic infusions of cash and headline-grabbing promotions, the Taj Mahal never escaped its financial burdens. In October 2016, after years of losses and a final union standoff, the casino closed for good. Hard Rock International later acquired the site, transforming it into a new resort and closing the book on Atlantic City's era of overbuilt mega casinos. Fisher Body Plant 21 opened in Detroit in 1919, its vast brick walls humming with the assembly of automobile bodies for General Motors. At its peak, the factory covered more than 600,000 square feet, filled with the clang of metal and the movement of thousands of workers. But by the 1980s, production lines fell silent as the auto industry contracted and jobs vanished. Scrappers and graffiti artists claimed the empty shell, turning it into a symbol of Detroit's industrial decline and a magnet for urban explorers. For decades, the plant stood as a haunting relic, until demolition crews finally brought it down in 2019. Rising above Detroit's skyline, Michigan Central Station once welcomed travelers with marble halls and soaring ceilings. The 18-story Beaux-Arts Tower opened in 1913, but decades of shrinking rail service left it shuttered by 1988. Rain poured through broken windows, and vandals stripped away fixtures as the building stood empty for 30 years. In 2018, Ford Motor Company purchased the station and committed millions to a massive restoration. Construction crews now fill the old concourse, aiming to revive it as a hub for innovation and community. Michigan Central's story is not just about loss, it is about the possibility of renewal on a grand scale. The Packard automotive plant sprawled across more than 3 million square feet on Detroit's east side, a city within a city built for the booming auto industry of the early 20th century. Opened in 1903, its reinforced concrete halls once echoed with the sounds of assembly lines and thousands of workers. The complex was a symbol of industrial ambition. After Packard shut down in the 1950s, the complex slipped into decades of decay. Environmental hazards, collapsing roofs, and tangled legal battles blocked redevelopment. By 2022, demolition crews had finally begun tearing down sections of the vast ruin, but much of the site remained, a stark reminder of industrial ambition on a scale rarely seen and now slowly vanishing. Cabrini Green once stretched across Chicago's near north side, its red brick row houses and high-rise towers home to more than 15,000 people at its peak. Built with the promise of affordable housing, the complex soon became a symbol of urban neglect. Years of underfunding left elevators broken and stairwells dark, while crime soared and families struggled with isolation. Federal hope. 6 grants fueled the demolition of the aging towers, starting in the 1990s. The last building fell in 2011. In their place, a mix of townhomes and apartments rose, aiming to blend incomes and erase the scars of segregation, but the debate over who truly benefited remains unresolved. In late August 2005, Hurricane Katrina sent a wall of water crashing over the levees into eastern New Orleans. Six Flags New Orleans, once alive with roller coasters and carnival lights, disappeared beneath 6 feet of floodwater. The rides and buildings sat submerged for weeks, their foundations rotting in the stagnant tide. Insurance battles dragged on as the park's owners and the city argued over responsibility. No repairs began. The gates never reopened. Over time, rust and weeds claimed the grounds, turning the park into a haunting shell. Filmmakers found a new use for the ruins, but the laughter never returned. Smoke still drifts from vents in the empty streets of Centralia, Pennsylvania, where an underground coal seam fire has burned since 1962. What started as a small landfill blaze spread into the mine beneath the town, igniting a slow-moving catastrophe. The fire crept through tunnels, releasing toxic gases and causing the ground to crack open, swallowing roads and homes. By the 1980s, the federal government launched a buyout program, spending millions to relocate families. Today, fewer than 10 residents remain, surrounded by warning signs and abandoned houses. The fire is expected to burn for centuries, leaving Centralia as a stark reminder of a disaster that cannot be extinguished. Bulldozers carved a path across central Florida in the 1960s, digging what was meant to be a 107-mile shipping shortcut between the Atlantic and the Gulf. By the time work stopped in 1971, nearly a third of the Cross-Florida Barge Canal was complete and $74 million had been spent, but the project ran into fierce resistance led by Marjorie Harris Carr, whose coalition of activists and scientists warned of irreversible damage to the Ocklawaha River and to Florida's drinking water. Their lawsuits and public campaigns halted construction. This marked the first time a federal megaproject was stopped for environmental reasons. Today, the unfinished canal is a 110-mile greenway named for Carr. It stands as a living monument to the power of grassroots action. Deep in Alaska's Wrangell Mountains, Kennecott rose almost overnight after copper was discovered in 1900. By the 1920s, the remote company town was shipping out more than $200 million worth of ore, an enormous sum for the era. Workers and their families built a self-contained world of mills, bunkhouses, and a hospital, all tied to the fortunes of the mine. But when the veins ran dry in 1938, Kennecott was deserted almost instantly. Today, the site stands as a remarkably preserved ghost town within Wrangell-St. Elias National Park, with restoration efforts keeping its weathered red buildings upright, a frozen snapshot of America's extraction boom and bust. Florida voters once put high-speed rail into their state constitution, driven by the vision of bullet trains linking Miami, Orlando, and Tampa. In 2000, Amendment 4 passed, requiring a new rail network to connect the state's biggest cities, with trains running over 120 miles per hour. But the promise unraveled almost as quickly. Cost estimates soon ballooned toward $20 billion, and ridership projections faced growing skepticism. Governor Jeb Bush vetoed funding in 1999, calling the project a boondoggle. By 2004, voters repealed the mandate they had just approved. Later, Governor Rick Scott turned down $2.4 billion in federal funds, warning that taxpayers could be left on the hook if the project failed. No tracks were ever laid, and the dream of public high-speed rail vanished from Florida's agenda. Years later, a private company, Brightline, launched its own service along a similar route, built without the sweeping public risk that doomed the original plan. Detroit's People Mover opened in 1987, circling downtown on a 2.9-mile elevated track. The original plan called for a sprawling regional transit system, with lines stretching out to the suburbs and connecting neighborhoods across the city. But as federal funding dried up and local support faded, only the downtown loop was built. Planners once promised tens of thousands of daily riders, but the system rarely saw more than a few thousand. Each trip ended up costing the city far more in subsidies than a taxi ride. Stations sat mostly empty, and the trains rolled past vacant lots and shuttered office towers. Without the promised extensions, the People Mover became a symbol of what happens when big visions are only half realized, a miniature metro looping endlessly with nowhere else to go, caught between ambition and reality. Dixie Square Mall opened its doors in Harvey, Illinois in 1966, promising a modern shopping experience for the growing suburbs south of Chicago. For a few years, the mall bustled with shoppers and anchored local commerce. But by the mid-1970s, rising crime and economic decline began to empty the storefronts. Security incidents and thefts spiked, and as tenants left, the mall's corridors grew quiet. In 1978, just 12 years after opening, Dixie Square shut down for good. Its story did not end there. In 1979, Hollywood transformed the empty mall into a set for the Blues Brothers, staging one of the most famous car chases in film history. After the cameras left, the building sat abandoned for decades, drawing urban explorers and vandals. Demolition was delayed by legal battles and asbestos concerns, leaving the shell to decay until 2012. Dixie Square Mall's afterlife as a pop culture icon gave it a strange kind of immortality, even as its walls finally came down. In the summer of 1964, Flushing Meadows in Queens transformed into a vision of tomorrow. The New York World's Fair filled the park with bold pavilions, soaring towers, and the shimmering Unisphere, a stainless steel globe that quickly became a national symbol. Most of the fair's futuristic structures vanished after closing day, dismantled or left to rust. Only the Unisphere and the New York State Pavilion still stand, their concrete and steel weathered by decades of rain and debate. The pavilion's space-age towers and vast tent-like roof once drew crowds, but years of neglect left them fenced off and crumbling. Preservationists have fought to save these remnants, sparking long arguments over restoration costs and the value of mid-century modernism. City budgets have shifted, with millions pledged and then delayed. Today, the pavilion's faded paint and empty observation decks raise questions about what America chooses to remember and what it quietly lets slip away. In the late 1970s, New York's West Side promised a radical transformation. The Westway Highway project aimed to bury the crumbling West Side Highway beneath landfill, creating a new riverfront park and freeing up land for development. With an estimated cost nearing $4 billion, backers saw it as a solution to traffic and urban decay. But environmental groups saw disaster looming beneath the surface. The planned landfill would cover a crucial stretch of Hudson River habitat, threatening the striped bass population that migrated along Manhattan's edge. In 1982, a federal court ruled that the project's environmental review had ignored the impact on the fish. Judge Thomas Greaser's decision halted all work, citing the Army Corps of Engineers' failure to fully assess the risks. Years of legal battles followed as the city and state scrambled to save the project. But by September 1985, the deadline for federal funding expired. Governor Cuomo and Mayor Koch conceded defeat, and Westway was officially cancelled. The fight set a new precedent. Environmental law could stop even the most powerful urban megaprojects in their tracks. Robert Moses envisioned a 10-lane expressway slicing through the heart of Lower Manhattan, promising to speed traffic but threatening to erase Soho, Little Italy, and hundreds of homes and businesses. In 1962, Jane Jacobs rallied neighbors, church leaders, and shopkeepers, gathering thousands of petition signatures and forming a fierce coalition. The fight reached a boiling point in 1968 when Jacobs was arrested during a raucous public hearing, accused of inciting a riot as tempers flared and the crowd demanded a voice. By 1969, after years of protests, court battles, and national headlines, city officials de-mapped the expressway route for good. Soho's cast-iron buildings and Little Italy's tight-knit streets survived, while Moses's top-down vision crumbled. The defeat of the Lower Manhattan Expressway became a rallying cry for grassroots activism, proving that ordinary citizens could reshape the city's future and protect its neighborhoods from bulldozers. When the Embarcadero Freeway opened in San Francisco in 1959, it was hailed as a symbol of progress, a double-decker highway slicing through downtown, carrying cars above city streets and walling off the waterfront. For decades, the concrete viaduct loomed over the Embarcadero, casting shadows on the city's historic ferry building and cutting off neighborhoods from the bay. Critics called it an eyesore, but plans to remove it stalled for years, blocked by cost concerns and the inertia of urban infrastructure. Everything changed on October 17, 1989, when the Loma Prieta earthquake rattled the Bay Area. The Embarcadero Freeway suffered severe structural damage, forcing its immediate closure. City officials faced a choice: pour millions of dollars into repairs or take a bold step and tear it down. After months of debate, San Francisco chose demolition. In 1991, crews began dismantling the elevated roadway piece by piece, clearing a path for sunlight and reconnecting the city to its waterfront. The removal sparked a transformation. The old freeway corridor became a wide boulevard lined with palm trees, bike paths, and plazas. The ferry building, once hidden in the freeway's shadow, became a bustling marketplace. Since demolition, more than $2 billion in new development has reshaped the waterfront, drawing residents and tourists alike. What began as a disaster forced the city to rethink its priorities and proved that sometimes subtraction can create more value than the most ambitious construction project. The Embarcadero Freeway's fall stands as a rare example of urban renewal born not from building, but from letting go. In the Mojave Desert, a checkerboard of empty streets stretches for miles, tracing the outline of a metropolis that never arrived. California City was conceived in the late 1950s by real estate developer Nat Mendelsohn, who imagined a rival to Los Angeles rising from the sand. He bought 80,000 acres and carved out a sprawling grid, complete with parks, artificial lakes, and a central civic plaza. Bold advertisements promised investors a booming city of 250,000 people, urging them to buy lots in the desert sun. The vision was grand. California City would be the next great urban center, its name written in the vastness of the land itself. Salesmen led prospective buyers down endless new roads, pointing to survey stakes and the promise of future neighborhoods. For a brief moment, the dream caught fire. By the early 1960s, thousands of lots had been sold, mostly sight unseen, and Mendelssohn's company became one of the largest land sellers in the country. But the population never came. The city's remote location, lack of jobs, and harsh climate made it a hard sell for families looking for more than just a plot of sand. The grid kept expanding, but most parcels remained empty, lines on a map waiting for houses that never broke ground. Today, California City covers more than 200 square miles, making it the third largest city by land area in the state. Its population, however, hovers around 14,000, a fraction of the 250,000 once envisioned. In the heart of town, there is a city hall, a police department, and a few schools serving the small but steady community that calls the place home. The rest is a silent expanse, where paved streets vanish into the brush, and cul-de-sacs end in nothing but wind and dust. From above, the city's ghost grid is unmistakable, a geometric maze etched into the desert, visible from satellites and passing planes, a monument to speculative ambition. Some residents have built tight-knit neighborhoods amid the emptiness, carving out a sense of place against the odds. City services run the basics, water, power, and police, over vast distances, often to just a handful of houses per block. For decades, the city has tried to attract new residents and businesses, offering incentives and touting affordable land. Yet the scale of the original dream still dwarfs the reality on the ground. The community endures where it can. The desert reclaims what it can, with tumbleweeds rolling through intersections and jackrabbits darting across cracked pavement. Winds scour empty lots and dust drifts into quiet streets. The desert is relentless. California City stands as a haunting experiment in urban speculation, a city planned for millions but delivered to the few. Its empty avenues and silent cul-de-sacs offer a stark reminder of how far vision and reality can drift apart. The grid remains, a blueprint for a future that never arrived, etched in the sand, waiting for footsteps that may never come. The haunt remains visible from high above. In the flat fields outside Waxahachie, Texas, a ring-shaped tunnel once promised to change the course of science. The superconducting super collider was designed to be the world's largest particle accelerator, a machine so powerful it could smash protons together at unprecedented energies and reveal the deepest secrets of the universe. Plans called for a 54-mile underground loop, dwarfing any collider built before or since. Construction began in the early 1990s, fueled by optimism and a surge of federal funding. Engineers bored nearly 15 miles of tunnel, carving through the Texas clay, while above-ground laboratories and support buildings started to take shape. Over $2 billion flowed into the project, including hundreds of millions from the state of Texas. Hopes ran high that American scientists would be the first to discover the Higgs boson, a particle so elusive it was sometimes called the God particle. But as the tunnel curved beneath the prairie, trouble brewed in Washington. Cost estimates soared, first from $4.4 billion to more than $10 billion, as technical hurdles and management shakeups slowed progress. Congressional committees grew wary of writing blank checks, especially after the end of the Cold War, when scientific priorities shifted and new budget pressures took hold. The Department of Energy's own audits flagged persistent overruns and a lack of oversight. By 1993, the project had become a lightning rod for criticism, its champions accused of over-promising, its skeptics demanding the money be spent elsewhere. In October of 1993, the House of Representatives voted 264 to 159 to pull the plug. The Senate failed to restore funding, and President Bill Clinton signed the cancellation. The unfinished tunnel was left to flood, its massive scope visible only in blueprints and the empty shafts scattered across the landscape. The project's collapse sent shockwaves through the scientific community. More than 2,000 physicists and engineers lost their jobs. Billions in sunk costs vanished overnight, along with America's lead in high-energy physics. Years later, Europe's CERN laboratory would claim the Higgs discovery, using a smaller but completed collider. The Waxahachie site was sold off for pennies on the dollar, its tunnels sealed and its equipment auctioned. For many, the superconducting supercollider stands as a monument to ambition, derailed by politics. A reminder that even the grandest scientific visions can be undone by shifting priorities and the hard math of federal budgets. The empty ring beneath Texas soil remains, a silent question about what might have been if science had won the vote. Beneath the Nevada desert, Yucca Mountain's tunnels sit empty, a project worth $17 billion, abandoned before it ever held a single ounce of nuclear waste. For decades, the federal government promised a permanent solution, carving out chambers 300 meters underground. But Nevada's fierce resistance, prolonged legal battles, and shifting administrations stalled every step. Congress created the Nuclear Waste Fund in 1982, collecting billions from utility customers, yet the site never opened. In 2010, funding vanished, leaving the mountains sealed and silent. Meanwhile, more than 77,000 tons of spent nuclear fuel remain scattered at 80 sites nationwide, stored in temporary casks near water and neighborhoods. The collapse of Yucca Mountain is measured not just in dollars lost, but in the risk that lingers for every community still waiting for an answer. The mountain stands as a monument to national paralysis, a promise broken, and a hazard left unresolved. Across all 30 entries, one truth emerges. America's grandest failures are not just about money lost, they reveal how vision and risk collide on a national scale. These abandoned megaprojects mark the fault lines between ambition and reality, leaving behind more than empty shells. They remind us that every blueprint for progress is also a gamble with history. The next big idea could transform the landscape, or it could join these silent monuments of what might have been.